Anybody NASCAR fan? Oh, sorry. I guess I can't use the pit stop thing. That we can predetermine periods of time when we will stop action for review. So we can say that exercise begins at 0800, at 0845. All exercise activity will stop until, and this will be the discussion points until 0855. We can do that as a rule of play. And if you go to Anniston, that happens occasionally. We'll stop just to make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're meeting our objectives and we're moving forward in the right direction. You better get a copy of the objectives. If you don't, you've got to ask for them. I tell you, sometimes you'll walk to evaluate an event and you'll not be provided anything other than a blank piece of paper and a clipboard. Been there. So Sam, she's smirking. You know, and you're just expected to evaluate what people do with no clear direction. You better receive the requirements and the procedures. What is expected to be identified? And what are the procedures for identifying that? And then evaluation forms. And again, I've given you several copies, kinds, just examples for you to review, to be familiar with. And you can write your own. If you're developing an exercise, you can write your own evaluation forms that works for you, that identifies and delineates what you need to know. Evaluators should generally be drawn from non-paying members of participating organizations. And that's why you all are here today. Sarah, explain what we're doing.
So we are actually going to try to redo how regional exercises are done. We didn't have money, which I think is ultimately turning out to be a blessing because now all the regional partners are accepting responsibility for each piece of it. So we're going to do the same exercise on 3 different days around the region because doing 21 hospitals and 11 EMS agencies all on one day it doesn't work well. And we've tried it 5 years in a row and it didn't do very well. So, but a few big things that we are changing is the exercise evaluation guides, which he's roughly going to touch on, are no longer going to be HC. So as you're doing medical surge, click this button and all of them print out. So when that happens, you want it with 25 pages and about 4 lines applied to what you're evaluating. So we're actually doing customized ones for, there will be an overarching one, but then each hospital and EMS agency can tweak them as they need to in order to meet the needs of their evaluation. We also, evaluators are very difficult to find. Often we use the hospital or county emergency managers. Well, they need to be somewhere else. Tony has no idea what goes on in the OR. Hey, that's just not his job. That's not his lane. If we're evaluating OR, we need to put OR staff in there to evaluate them. I have no business being on a med-surg floor other than to document events. I'm ER and trauma and ICU. Med-surg, not my lane. OB, really not my lane. But so that's why we're having these 2 trainings, because all of us have a story of when we showed up. Here, you're evaluating this, and you don't even know what the scenario is. And so we're trying to prevent that. We are going to actually do the evaluator briefings, but we're not going to do them the day of the exercise. We're talking about multiple locations, so that's not going to work. We will do something probably through GoToMeeting that will be recorded that people can go watch later, so they'll at least have an idea of what's going on and not be floundering out there. And so those are 2 of the big changes that we're doing. Any? Okay. But yeah, we're putting a lot more focus on the evaluators and the evaluation than we are on the rest of the exercise. Most spend so much time on the injects and scenario and everything else, and that really is a teeny piece of it that realistically is not very important if people aren't looking at how you're responding.
So the dates and times of the exercises, I know one of them, June 25th at 6:30 in the evening. So we'll be looking for evaluators because we're doing a big story here.
And you and Lake Norman are not the only ones. I'm trying to remember who else. One other hospital.
Northeast, Pat is.
It wasn't Pat, is doing the evening one. The other two are during the day. They'll be the typical 9 to noon-ish. And they'll be sort of scattered around the region.
So just here, and we're doing Huntersville and Matthews and us simultaneously. So we're gonna need two or three at Matthews, 2 or 3 at Huntersville, and probably 6 here. So that's a lot of evaluators to come up with.
That's yet another reason to break it up into 3 days, is to use our resources
Correct.
better.
So I ask you to write that date down and consider the time. I'm gonna pass around. Sarah had this with her. It's an exercise evaluation guide. And you'll see on it, we list the core capabilities, operational communications, and then the critical tasks are all identified. And there's ratings, definitions, and just take a look at it. That's to give you an idea of what it looks like. The evaluators, as Sarah said, should have training skills so they can guide the discussion without injecting themselves into it. You got to be able to go in, again, objectively, and not, you kind of got to guide where you want them to go if they're getting off base based on what the objectives are and based what the anticipated outcome should be. You've got to be able to guide them in that direction without saying, well, here's what we do, or here's what I did. You can't be subjective about it at all. There's a difference. It's like the difference between facilitating and teaching. You know, a big difference between the two. You actually become a facilitator, and you're just guiding their actions and guiding where you want them to go. You should have copies of the plans and procedures, or at least excerpts that are specific to the objectives. You should have subject matter knowledge, and again, that's what Sarah spoke to. And we've historically, we're not very good about doing that. You know, Sarah, I'm thinking your guest services. So what could I have Sarah in guest services evaluate?
How we handle families
How we handle families and reunification of patients and work with case management. Absolutely right. So I want to start thinking in that direction. Now, house supervisors. They're not good at any one thing.
Thank you.
No, they know the entire, they know the pulse of the organization, of the hospital. They know what's going on every place.
They see the full web.
Yeah, what could they evaluate?
The flow of patients.
Patient flow.
Unit cross communication.
Absolutely.
Staff.
Bed placement. What if how many patients can be discharged in the next 4 hours? Man, you know, because you've been on every unit and you can assess that, and without looking, you probably have a pretty good idea on any given shift. Man, that's what they're good at, so that's what they could evaluate. Public safety, safety and security, sure, certainly. Who else in here's got a weird job? Sam, you weren't here to introduce yourself. Tell everybody who you are.
I'm the Emergency Preparedness Coordinator for Iredell County Health Department, so I work in the public health field.
Ooh, so what could Sam come evaluate?
I asked Sarah, she said she wanted.
I do.
I did too. I was like, you really?
Yeah, intake is a huge thing. Once you learn more about the public health role, especially with the pod planning, intake of patients process and flow, especially in the ER, but even looking at process and flow out in the field, while theirs is a little bit different, it's the similar basic concept of how quickly you can get them through.
And one of the things that I think they could even branch into is to work correlatively with infection prevention and control. You know, because that's part of what they do in the community as well. So if we had a bunch of people come in with camel flu or whatever, well, that's what it is. We had swine flu and bird flu, camel flu, MERS. If we got a bunch of people come in who are infectious, public health could evaluate that very, very easily. So what else we got? What does a trauma program manager evaluate? Well, I think that if we have a bunch of people come in that are surgical patients going to have to go to the OR, trauma program manager could be a great evaluator for that process of getting them from the ED to the OR, because that's what you're familiar with. That's the concept you have. So there's a job for everybody. We just got to find that. You know, Kathy, respiratory therapy. There's a job for respiratory therapists, and you know, all of your respiratory therapists are on the decon team. There we go.
There's a lot of things we have not evaluated because we have not had the appropriate people to evaluate them.
That's exactly
Infection
right.
control, I don't know of anybody who has looked at that. Really looking at the flow of respiratory services, I don't think that's really been done. It's been, a ventilator showed up, and then that was the end of the evaluation. So
Yeah.
basically, all these departments have never really been engaged in the planning because who was going to evaluate it? We didn't feel comfortable doing it.
Well,
So-
you know, that's something I just met with Dr. Fletcher about. Dr. Fletcher's our Senior Vice President of Medical Services, and we can convert our whole pediatric ED to negative pressure. I said, we need to do a drill where we have an infectious disease process come in, and we need to get the patient, every patient out of peds ED and make it available for infectious patients. He says, that's a great idea. Now, how am I going to do it? You know, that becomes the challenge. But what a great opportunity, but I don't have enough evaluators. I don't have the right kind of evaluators to evaluate that. Well, I got Sam now.
I think a place that you could look for in the future would be communicable disease nurses at the health departments.
Okay,
I mean, Mecklenburg has a whole team of communicable disease nurses, so I think that would be your SME.
okay. So more selection of team members. Really got to be people with people skills. The evaluators have to, you've got to be able to, you just got to play well with others. You know, so many folks go in with a snooty attitude, and evaluators are kind of looked at as bosses, and oh, they're watching me see what I do wrong. So you've got to be able to go in and soften that. You've got to be able to communicate well with people and let them know what your role is and be able to communicate effectively with them. Again, objectivity. I'm going to beat that till it's dead. But we lose objectivity really easily, and we can't afford to. Got to be self-motivated. You got to be sure of yourself. That would probably been more appropriate. You got to be confident in your skill level that you can recognize what's going on based on the objective and based on the plan. Willingness to help. The girls from 3C can all tell you when they all came to my office, the one question I asked all three of them was, why do you want to be a nurse? You know, and they all three had the right answer because they all wanted to help people. You got to be a willingness to help. You're not there to be an evaluator because I had to do it or because somebody told me I had to do it. You got to be there to help because you want to help improve the process, help improve the outcome, and that's exactly what you'd be doing. Honesty and integrity are critical. Report the facts truthfully. They cannot be colored. They cannot be adjusted. They can't be, you can't add to what happened to make it sound better or worse. And that happens when we evaluate drills, especially if somebody doesn't like somebody.
Or if they do like somebody.
Or if they do, that's exactly right.
They don't want to be too hard on them.
That's right. And that happens probably more often than not. Well, I don't want them to get in trouble. You're defeating the whole purpose of the exercise.
Can you use people in the community that are retired?
Absolutely.
Volunteers?
Absolutely.
I'm just thinking about some people. I was at this little Memorial Day party, and there were these guys that are, you know, they're forced to retire from U.S. Airways, the pilots.
Yeah.
At 63, but they're kind of lost on what to do. One of them last night was a C-130 Vietnam pilot.
Yeah.
And he thought he would go back and do some other things, but I mean, he's just kind of hanging around. But he's got military skills, he's got, you know, honesty, integrity. I mean, I just know a group of men that are retiring and they don't really know where they fit in.
There is a place for most people. I was almost said everybody, but
I know. I mean, even my husband, he's going to retire shortly, and he doesn't really know what his role is going to be other than farming.
pilots, most of them have military experience,
Right.
are very familiar with command and control and
Right.
something like the incident command
Incident
system.
command center.
Safety and public safety, they do those things well, absolutely. I think, I belong to InfraGard, which is the civilian side of the FBI, and I did a little presentation for them. I had people come to me afterwards that two were retired nurses. Wanted to know if they could participate in our exercises. One is the emergency manager for Duke Power, and wanted to know if they could participate in our exercises. I said, absolutely. I mean, these are people that are experienced that there's a place for, and you got them in the community, and it's just a matter of, if you all sit here and think, you'll think of somebody that doesn't work here that could be a good evaluator. Certainly.
Well, and that's one of the keys is doesn't work here. And that we're also trying to get to is to have non-Novant personnel at Novant, send Novant to another hospital so that you are an outside, more impartial observer, less of that connection. There is a connection that's helpful because you know the process, you know the flow, but always evaluating yourself, you're going to always miss the same issues quite often.
And I'll tell you, at our level, it really works. I know that all of us went to Gaston Memorial and evaluated an evacuation exercise. That's cool. I've had, well, back in the day, John Tart and folks from Carolinas have come here to evaluate for us. And that's the way it should be, because that forces objectivity. It takes away all opportunity for somebody to be subjective, or pretty much. Training should include all aspects of the exercise, including goal, objectives, and scenario. These are the things you should be briefed on. Trained as an evaluator for that exercise, you should be informed of, educated to the goals, the objectives, and the scenario. Again, should have them in writing. You should include discussion of scenarios to expect. Well, I can write a scenario, but is there going to be, are we going to have little spin-offs of the scenario that are going to occur naturally? Yeah, we are. Some of those are really good, but we've got to make sure that as we guide people, we don't let those things get out of control. Because, man, it can change the whole face of what we're doing, and we can chase a rabbit and get really lost and not achieve anything. Include guidance on observing the exercise. What kind of guidance might you need in observing the exercise?
Where to be, when?
Where to be, when? Where to stand? Where to locate? You want to be in a position that's not obtrusive, that's out of the way, where you almost aren't seen or heard, so you can watch everything. So observing, yes. What to look for should be included as part of the objectives, but there might be specifics. We want you to look for X, Y, Z. We want you to pay attention. We want to make sure that when command is established and the incident commander establishes command, that they verbalize or consider other general staff positions, or that they consider developing an incident action plan. We want to observe those things, what to look for. And then what to record. Oh, what do we really want to know? You know what? I'm a fan of just write down everything that you think, and then you can sort it out later. That works better for me, because if you say, I want this information, I'm not going to remember that. I'll just write down what I see or what I hear, and then I'll sort it out afterward. And then, how to use the evaluation guide or other tools. You should be informed during this orientation meeting on how to use the exercise evaluation guide, or how to use the objectives, or how to follow what needs to be documented. Verify roles and responsibilities and assignments and provide any updates to scenario or evaluation tools. That takes place in this orientation meeting. Everybody's given an assignment, what their role is, where they're to be, what their responsibilities are, and given, maybe the scenario changed since it was sent to you a week ago. Maybe there's tweaks in it or minute changes. Then those need to be provided to you at that time. A briefing to review exercise scenario and activities, we've talked about that, provides time for the evaluators to ask questions and verify your roles and responsibilities. And you should. I think you should challenge whoever's conducting this to make sure that you understand very directly, very clearly what your expectations are. If you read an objective and it doesn't sound quite right to you, it doesn't sound smart enough, then you need to challenge that kindly. To say, what do you really mean by this? What do you really want to measure from this? What do you hope to achieve or gain from this? Observe and collect data. You need to be at your evaluation site at least 15 minutes before the exercise start, or start X. Why?
So you can see it from beginning to end.
Yes, absolutely. Do these things ever start on time?
Probably not.
Rarely. But to familiarize yourself with the location, with the technology, to see what's available, nose around, look where stuff is, so you have a working idea of what the room is or what the site looks like.
And remember, most likely you're going somewhere you've never been before. So
Correct.
I actually usually lean towards the 30-minute side, plus I plan to get there 15 minutes before that because I'm going to get lost.
And I always want to know where the closest bathroom is.
Yes.
Seriously, I mean, those are things you gotta look for, because nobody's gonna tell you. So you've gotta kind of snoop around. And if I tell you 15 minutes, you'll probably be there on time. Be in a position to best see and hear overall actions without being obtrusive. But,
30 minutes, just give me time.
oh, thank you.
I did it the right way instead of backwards.
Do not interfere with exercise play other than to guide some of the actions. Take detailed notes of who, and this is like writing a newspaper article. Take notes on who said what, did what they did, where they did it, when it happened, when it got documented, when it got said, when it didn't get said, and why. Did they describe, did they verbalize why that action was taking place? Did they verbalize why they made the decision they made? You know, I was contemplating this morning, I was thinking, what's the difference between a conclusion and a determination? I bother my head with these things. Any idea? A conclusion is finite and final,
It's the outcome.
and a determination is, we need to do this right now, and it may not be the conclusion. Make sense? And then how? How did something happen? How did something get said? Our verbal communications are absolutely terrible, especially in drills, disasters, bad times. You ever want a good exercise? Work with the ham radio operators, with the Aries or Races guys, and ask them to send, you tell them a statement that you want transmitted, and they'll transmit it, and you're listening to them and say, that's not what I said. But these people are professional, trained communicators and listeners. And they will say verbatim what you told them. And it's a great exercise in what we say and what we don't say. But how did it get said? Was it said as a question when it should have been a statement, or vice versa? And then observe and collect data. Again, exercise evaluation guides are a tool that we can use. Notebooks, I've used just a portfolio and lined paper just to take notes on. Blank sheets, yes, I think many of us in here have been handed a blank sheet of paper and a clipboard to evaluate an exercise. Not fair. Index cards. I tend to lose them. You know, they're too small, and I end up with them in different pockets and forget they're there. Yeah. Video cameras are great. Video cameras are great for going back and not only reviewing what somebody said or what their actions were, but to evaluate body language. I think body language is critical. It's something that we don't evaluate a lot. But what was somebody's body attitude when they made a decision, or when they said something, or when they were provided information, or they were directed to do something? It's amazing to watch how people's bodies respond. Digital cameras are a wonderful tool. With our phones, we can do both now. We can video, or we can take pictures. Please make sure and remember that some of these would be considered for official use only, or maybe confidential, and that if you're going to save them, send them to the lead facilitator or to the controllers, and then delete them. You've got to remember not to keep them on your phone. Lord knows they'll end up on Facebook. And voice, they will.
I know, people
and also voice recorders. So there are lots of tools to observe and collect data. We want to observe and collect data initiating the scenario. How does it begin? Are people in the right roles? Are they in position? Do they respond to the appropriate position? Was there a deviation from the plans and procedures? You should have been provided the plans and procedures. Now is somebody coming in recreating a scenario in front of your eyes? If they are, then we need to guide them and keep them back on track. Timeliness. One of the things we have difficulty with, because most of our exercises are time compressed. So something we would ordinarily do in 4 hours, we're going to try to do in an hour to evaluate it. And we have to make accommodation for that. So we have to stay on a timeline. You have to know what the timeline is in order to stay on it. Monitoring and assessing scenario events, same thing. Making sure that you got a copy of the measles, make sure that we're on schedule, and if an inject comes in from the measles to wherever you're evaluating, it's up to you to document whether or not that got acted on. And if it got acted, or if it didn't get acted on, and what time it got acted on or not acted on, and what action was taken, by whom, for how long. So there's a lot to document on that. Command and control, or incident command. Everybody in here's had IS 100 and 200? Yeah. You know, it's one thing to take it, it's another to use it. So if you're evaluating command structure, you've got to be proficient in incident command to know the nuances of it. Creative problem solving. I love creative problem solving. Does that mean that you're going to evaluate it subjectively now? If it's creative because it didn't come from the scenario and it didn't come from the objectives? No, not necessarily. We just document what that creative problem solving was. Non-judgmentally, whether it was good or bad. Doesn't matter what I think. I'm going to write it down so that the lead evaluator can then put it in the after action report and they can evaluate it from there whether it was good or bad. It's not our place. And then equipment issues that affect players' efforts. And invariably you'll find phones that don't work, you'll find printers that don't print, you'll find computers that didn't work. We found out in our rapid registration process that we cannot rapidly register people in the ambulance bay here because we don't have wireless outside the walls of the hospital. So I just bought 10 MiFis for our registration so we can do that. But that's creative problem solving. It would have been $5,000 to put antennas out there, and it was $40 a piece for MiFis. So good deal. But equipment issues will notoriously show up. We had at Huntersville last week, we did a decon drill, and the drain backed up in the decon room, ran into the emergency department, ran across the rug, and ran outside. Yeah, it was ugly. It was ugly. And with plumber's dye in it. So,
And cold water.
Yeah. So water and fluorescent green. Yeah. Observe and collect data. We need to identify, message in the passing of information. So if message comes in, does that message get passed to the people it needs to get passed to? If so, to whom, by whom, at what time? Same thing with message out. We don't track that well. Discussion between participants is critical. Not arguments, not arguing. I did a class down in Anniston, did healthcare leadership. You leaving? You don't have to be quiet, just go.
Well, it's a party then.
We had people that weren't familiar with each other, and the tables were set up as a square, as a command center, and we actually had people reaching across the table and grabbing people by the collar because they were mad at them because they made a wrong decision. And can tempers flare in a command center? Oh yeah. How about in an ED with ED docs? One of my pets, you know? Yeah. So discussion is good. Or charge nurses. Decisions, conclusion or determination. Do we just have to make a determination for right now, or did we conclude this operation as it was designed to be concluded? Directives, command to one or more people. We're going to document movement and activity.